The night of February 26, 2026 was draped in the profound quiet that only a vast expanse of open water can offer. Aboard the USS Hartley, a guided missile destroyer slicing through the dark waves of the Persian Gulf, the world was reduced to the low hum of turbines and the gentle hiss of the sea against its gray hull. It was 2:30 a.m. local time. Most of the 329-person crew slept in their racks, trusting the watchstanders in the Combat Information Center, or CIC, to keep them safe. The air in the CIC was cool and smelled of ozone and, honestly, a little stale coffee. Blue and green lights from dozens of monitors cast an ethereal glow on the focused faces of the young sailors and officers on duty. They were the ship's eyes and ears, a human extension of its powerful electronic senses. On the bridge, the officer of the deck gazed out at the placid surface of the Gulf, a dark mirror reflecting a star-dusted sky. The ship was on a routine freedom of navigation patrol, a mission 1,000 times performed and 1,000 times uneventful. It was a demonstration of presence, a subtle but firm statement of international maritime law. The USS Hartley was a symbol of American naval power, an intricate machine of war designed for precisely the kind of conflict that seemed so distant on this serene night. The crew moved with a practiced, almost monotonous rhythm, their actions honed by endless drills. They checked radar screens, monitored radio frequencies, and logged the positions of distant container ships and fishing dhows. It was a night like any other. The atmosphere was one of professional calm, a state of relaxed vigilance that is the hallmark of a well-trained naval crew. They were deep inside one of the world's most volatile regions, yet the immediate environment felt as safe as a training exercise off the coast of Virginia. The ship's powerful AN/SPY-1D radar swept the surrounding airspace, its electronic pulses probing the darkness for miles in every direction. It was a silent, invisible guardian, part of the Aegis combat system that made the Hartley one of the most formidable warships ever built. Every system was green, every check was normal. The ship and its crew were a coiled spring, ready for a threat that, according to all intelligence, was not coming. But unseen, miles away, a different kind of preparation was underway. Hidden from satellites and beyond the horizon, forces were aligning against the American destroyer. The quiet of the Gulf was a fragile illusion, a thin veneer of peace stretched taut over deep-seated geopolitical tensions. The men and women of the USS Hartley were performing their duties with the quiet confidence of a superior force operating in familiar waters. They had no reason to suspect that they were sailing directly into a meticulously planned ambush. In the silent, air-conditioned spaces of the ship, the crew trusted their technology and their training. They were unaware that in just a few short minutes their world would be torn apart by fire and steel. The USS Hartley was not just on a random patrol, it was navigating the most critical maritime choke point on Earth, the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway, separating Iran from the Arabian Peninsula, is the jugular vein of the global economy. Through this slender passage, less than 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point, flows nearly a third of the world's seaborne oil. Any disruption here sends immediate shockwaves through international markets, threatening to cripple industries and destabilize nations. For this reason, the United States Navy has maintained a constant and powerful presence in the region for decades. The mission was simple in name, but complex in execution: ensure the free and uninterrupted flow of commerce. The Hartley's specific task was a freedom of navigation operation, or FONOP. It was a deliberate act of sailing through international waters that are sometimes contentiously claimed by coastal nations. In this case, it was a subtle challenge to Iran's expansive territorial assertions and its periodic threats to close the strait. The destroyer, with its advanced weaponry and surveillance capabilities, acted as a guarantor of international law. It was a floating piece of American sovereignty, a clear message that the United States would not permit a single nation to hold the world's energy supply hostage. The ship's presence was both a deterrent and a reassurance, depending on which shore you were watching from. For Iran, and specifically for its Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the USS Hartley represented a direct challenge to its regional dominance. The IRGC viewed the Persian Gulf not as an international highway, but as its own strategic backyard. The presence of a powerful American warship, operating with impunity just miles from its coastline, was a constant source of irritation and a perceived threat to its national security. The IRGC had long developed an arsenal of asymmetric weapons, fast attack boats, sea mines, and a growing inventory of sophisticated anti-ship missiles, designed specifically to counter the technological superiority of the US Navy. List chunking, media group, close-up of Iranian fast attack boats, sea mines in water, naval mines being deployed. The stock would distribute equally. Fast attack boats, sea mines, and a growing inventory of sophisticated anti-ship missiles, designed specifically to counter the technological superiority of the US Navy. The Strait was their home turf, and they were determined to prove they could control it. The strategic importance of this waterway transformed the Hartley's routine patrol into a high-stakes geopolitical chess match. Every move the ship made was scrutinized by Iranian observers on shore. Every radar emission was analyzed, and every patrol pattern was logged. The crew of the Hartley was well aware of the tension that simmered just beneath the surface. They knew that at any moment, a political miscalculation or a deliberate provocation could ignite a conflict. Their mission was to be strong but not aggressive, to be visible but not threatening. It was a delicate balancing act performed on a razor's edge, where the calm waters could erupt into a battlefield with no warning. The attack on the USS Hartley was not a spontaneous act of aggression. It was the culmination of a carefully orchestrated campaign of deception. For 72 hours leading up to the strike, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps engaged in what military analysts would later call pattern masking. The IRGC initiated a series of large-scale military exercises along its coast. They moved mobile missile launchers, activated fire control radars, and conducted simulated launches. This flurry of activity was not unusual. Iran frequently conducted such drills, often timing them to coincide with the presence of U.S. naval assets. It was a form of strategic signaling, a show of force meant to project strength and defiance. U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, diligently monitored the activity. Satellites tracked the movement of hardware on the ground, and signals intelligence analysts listened to the chatter of Iranian military communications. The data flowed into intelligence hubs, where it was assessed and categorized. The conclusion was unanimous. The activity was elevated but non-hostile. It fit the established pattern of Iranian behavior. The drills were noisy, public, and seemingly transparent. Because they had seen this exact script play out so many times before, the American intelligence apparatus saw no cause for alarm. The alert status for U.S. forces in the region remained unchanged, and the warning never reached a level of combat priority. This was precisely the reaction the IRGC had counted on. They had deliberately conditioned their adversary to ignore the very signals that would normally precede an attack. By repeatedly crying wolf, they had lulled the shepherd into a state of complacency. Hidden within this cacophony of routine military exercises was a single deadly serious operation. The IRGC had been tracking the USS Hartley's patrol patterns for 11 days, noting its speed, course, and the precise timing of its route. They were not just watching the ship, they were studying its habits, searching for a moment of predictable vulnerability. The grand theater of the military drills provided the perfect cover for this patient, predatory surveillance. The actual launch order did not come from a bustling command center involved in the public exercises. It originated from a hardened bunker buried 200 feet beneath the Zagros Mountains, far from the prying eyes of American intelligence. The order was transmitted to a single mobile transporter erector launcher, or TL. This vehicle was not part of the visible drills. It was hidden inside a nondescript warehouse in a commercial district 85 miles inland. To any outside observer, it was just another truck in another building. The IRGC had successfully masked their hostile intent within the noise of their own routine, creating a fatal blind spot in the American intelligence network. The IRGC's meticulous planning had identified a critical flaw in the American defensive posture. Their surveillance revealed that the USS Hartley's patrol route created a recurring predictable window of maximum vulnerability. Once every patrol cycle, for a period of approximately 90 seconds, the destroyer reached a point in its track that was at the maximum possible distance from the rest of its carrier strike group. At this specific location, 43 nautical miles southeast of the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas, the Hartley was 380 miles away from the aircraft carrier and its protective screen of cruisers and other destroyers. This distance was crucial. It meant that supporting aircraft and missile defense assets from the carrier group would have the longest possible travel time to assist the Hartley. It was this 90-second window that the IRGC targeted with cold, mathematical precision. Their plan was not just to launch a missile but Persian style. in action soum Staum on Dao Bao. But to launch it at the exact moment when the Hartley was most isolated. The weapon chosen for this task was the Fate 313, Iran's most advanced solid-fuel, short-range ballistic missile. With a range of 500 kilometers and a terminal speed of Mach 4, it was designed for rapid, surprise attacks. The missile's solid-fuel propellant meant it could be launched with minimal preparation, unlike liquid-fueled missiles that require a lengthy and easily detectable fueling process. The Fate 313 was a weapon built for just this kind of scenario, a quick, decisive strike from a concealed position. The launch vehicle, hidden in its warehouse staging area, was a key component of the deception. A mobile TL is inherently difficult to track. It can move, hide in civilian infrastructure, and then deploy in a matter of minutes. At the designated time, the roof of the warehouse slid open, and the TEL raised its missile into firing position. The entire process was swift and silent. There was no large convoy, no telltale heat signature from fueling operations, and no unusual radio communications that might alert American intelligence. The launch was a surgical operation, isolated from the broader, noisier military exercises happening elsewhere. It was a single, sharp needle hidden within a haystack of benign activity. At 2:40 a.m., as the USS Hartley sailed into the pre-calculated coordinates, the final command was given. The Fate 313 missile ignited, roaring to life inside its concealed launch bay. It climbed into the night sky, a streak of fire on a trajectory that had been programmed days in advance. The IRGC had weaponized predictability. They had turned the Hartley's own routine, its adherence to a standard patrol pattern designed for efficiency and safety, into the very instrument of its near destruction. The 90-second window of vulnerability was now open, and a 450-kilogram high-explosive warhead was screaming towards the unsuspecting American warship at 4 times the speed of sound. The first indication of danger aboard the USS Hartley came at 2:41:07 a.m. A young sailor in the CIC, his eyes glued to a radar screen, saw a new symbol flash into existence. It was a fast-moving track, appearing seemingly from nowhere, already high in the atmosphere, and descending rapidly. 8 seconds after the missile had ignited on the Iranian mainland, the ship's powerful AN-SPY-1D radar had detected it. The Aegis combat system, the vessel's computerized brain, instantly analyzed the track's velocity, altitude, and trajectory. Within milliseconds, it classified the object as a high-probability threat, a ballistic missile on a terminal course for the Hartley. The calm of the CIC was shattered by a series of piercing electronic alarms. The ship's automated defense system sprang to life. The Aegis system, operating in full automatic mode, selected the appropriate countermeasure. At 2:41:15 a.m., just 8 seconds after the initial detection, a hatch on the forward vertical launch system slid open, and a Standard Missile 2, Block 3 Alpha interceptor blasted out with a deafening roar. It streaked into the night sky, a plume of white smoke trailing behind it, accelerating to intercept the incoming Fate 313. The entire sequence, from detection to launch, took less time than it takes to read this sentence. It was a testament to the incredible speed and sophistication of modern naval warfare, a battle of algorithms and microchips fought in the blink of an eye. But the IRGC had anticipated this response. They knew the capabilities of the Aegis system and the SM-2 interceptor. The Fate 313 that was hurtling towards the Hartley was not a standard model. It had been fitted with a modified terminal guidance package, an innovation designed specifically to defeat American missile defenses. In the final 12 seconds of its flight, as the American SM-2 closed in, the Iranian missile executed a subtle but critical maneuver. It performed a shallow S-curve, deviating from its predictable linear descent path at a rate of 0.4 degrees per second. It was a small, almost insignificant change in its trajectory. This slight, pre-programmed wobble was enough. The SM-2's tracking algorithm was optimized to predict the future position of a target moving in a straight or gently arcing line. The sudden, erratic side-to-side movement of the Fate 313 threw off the interceptor's calculations. The SM-2, unable to correct its course in time, detonated its proximity-fused warhead 280 meters away from the target, a miss. For the crew of the USS Hartley, the bright flash in the sky was not a sign of salvation, but a confirmation of their worst fears. The final line of defense had failed. At 2:41:23 a.m., the Fate 313, its warhead armed, slammed into the port side of the destroyer. The impact was a cataclysmic event. A violent shudder ran through the 9,700-ton ship, throwing sailors from their bunks. The 450-kilogram warhead detonated just 3 feet below the waterline, tearing a 14-foot gash in the portside hull. Seawater rushed into the breach at a rate of 600 gallons per minute. Secondary explosions ripped through a nearby ammunition handling room, and thick, acrid smoke began to fill the compartments below deck. Alarms blared across the ship as it immediately listed 8 degrees to port. Commander David Chin was in his sea cabin, just off the bridge, when the missile struck. He was thrown to the deck, the sound of the explosion, a deafening metallic roar that seemed to come from the very soul of his ship. His training took over. Chin raced to the bridge, his mind already processing the cascade of damage reports flooding the communication lines. Fires in 3 compartments. Widespread flooding. The primary radar array was damaged, its capacity reduced to 60%. 17 sailors were wounded, 4 of them critically. The ship was hurt, but it was not dead. The crew, shaken but disciplined, responded instantly. Damage control teams, clad in firefighting gear, plunged into the smoke-filled passageways to battle the flames and shore up the flooded compartments. Medical personnel rushed to the aid of the injured. Every sailor had a job to do, and they did it with a desperate, focused urgency. Commander Chin now faced a series of impossible decisions, each with potentially catastrophic consequences. His first priority was to save his ship and his crew. The damage control effort was paramount, but he was also a warship commander under enemy fire. The attack could not go unanswered. His initial instinct was to order a limited, proportional counterstrike. His ship still had its Tomahawk cruise missiles, and the Aegis system, though damaged, could still guide them. He could target the launch site if his systems could locate it. It would be a clear message. An attack on a U.S. warship will be met with immediate force. But as he stood in the darkened, chaotic CIC, a new, more alarming piece of information appeared on the remaining functional displays. At 2:44 a.m., just 3 minutes after the impact, Iranian fire control radars began to activate all along a 150-mile stretch of the coast. These were not the search radars associated with the earlier exercises. These were the targeting radars for Silkworm and C-802 anti-ship missile batteries. It was not a single, isolated attack. It was the prelude to a massive, coordinated assault. The Iranians were not just striking, they were preparing to sink a ship. The option for a limited, proportional response evaporated in that instant. This was a fight for survival. The activation of the Iranian coastal missile batteries changed everything for Commander Chin. This was no longer a matter of a measured response, it was a clear and present danger to the very existence of the USS Hartley. The Iranians were preparing to finish the job. Faced with the imminent threat of a second, and likely overwhelming wave of missile attacks, Chin made a critical decision. He upgraded the response protocol from limited to full retaliation. He was not just going to return fire, he was going to dismantle the network that was threatening to destroy him. His primary duty had shifted from simple self-defense to offensive action, to ensure the survival of his command. At his order, the weapons officers in the CIC began programming a coordinated strike. The Hartley, though wounded and listing, was still a potent fighting machine. Its 96 vertical launch cells were mostly intact. Using the targeting data that remained from before the radar was damaged, combined with real-time intelligence being relayed from other assets, they prepared a salvo of 12 Tomahawk cruise missiles. The target list was comprehensive. It included the suspected origin point of the Fate 313 launch, 3 of the newly activated coastal missile batteries, a known IRGC naval command center, and a key radar installation that was coordinating the Iranian assets. As the Hartley's crew prepared their counterpunch, help was already on the way. The USS Tempest, another Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, was operating 67 nautical miles away. Its commander, Sarah Okonkwo, had received the Hartley's battle damage reports and tactical data via the secure Link 16 data network. She saw the same threat picture that Chin was seeing, a crippled sister ship and a coastline bristling with active missile batteries. Without waiting for orders from higher command, Commander Okonkwo took initiative. The Tempest was undamaged, and its systems were fully operational. She immediately ordered her own Tomahawk salvo to support the Hartley. The Tempest launched an additional 8 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Her targets were chosen to complement Chin's strike, aimed at 2 bases known to house the IRGC's fleet of fast attack boats and a suspected underground command bunker. At 2:58 a.m., the first of the American missiles began to hit their targets in Iran. The warehouse complex that had hidden the Fate 313 launcher was obliterated, destroying 6 additional missiles that were in storage. 3 of the 4 targeted coastal batteries were reduced to rubble. It was a swift and devastating blow, but one Iranian battery survived the onslaught. It had already been given its firing orders. Just as the Tomahawks impacted, the surviving battery launched 2 C-802 anti-ship missiles, which were now streaking across the water towards the wounded USS Hartley. The 2 incoming C-802 missiles represented a moment of redemption for the Hartley's Aegis system. Unlike the sophisticated high-speed ballistic missile that had struck the ship, these were subsonic, sea-skimming cruise missiles, a more conventional threat that the Aegis system was well-equipped to handle. Despite the damage to its primary radar array, the system detected the incoming threats. 2 more SM-2 interceptors launched from the Hartley's decks. This time, there were no advanced, evasive maneuvers to contend with. The intercepts were perfect. The 2 C-802s were destroyed in bright flashes of light, approximately 8,000 meters from the ship. The crew had a brief, fleeting moment of relief. They had survived the second wave. But the battle was far from over. The IRGC's plan had multiple phases. The missile strikes were just the opening act, designed to cripple the American warship. The next phase was about to begin. At 3:07 a.m., in response to the massive American retaliatory strike, Iran unleashed its swarm. From the port of Bandar Abbas and other hidden coves along the coast, a fleet of 23 small, fast, and heavily armed IRGC attack boats surged into the strait. The first wave of 11 boats sped across the water at 45 knots, their low profiles making them difficult radar targets. They were armed with a mix of C-701 anti-ship missiles, torpedoes, and heavy machine guns. It was the U.S. Navy's classic nightmare scenario, a high-tech destroyer, wounded and less maneuverable, being swarmed by a pack of agile, aggressive speedboats. Aboard the Hartley, Commander Chin faced another critical choice. The logical military decision might have been to withdraw. His ship was damaged, taking on water, and had wounded sailors aboard. He could have turned his ship away from the coast, using the cover of the arriving USS Tempest to retreat into the wider Arabian Sea to save his vessel. This would have been the prudent, cautious choice. It would have preserved his ship and the lives of his crew from further, almost certain, danger. Retreat was a valid tactical option, one that many commanders would have taken without hesitation. However, Commander Chin chose to hold his ground. He made the deliberate decision not to withdraw from the strait. In his mind, retreating would be ceding the waterway to the Iranians. It would be a victory for their aggressive tactics and would signal that a U.S. warship could be forced out of international waters through violence. He decided that the mission to uphold freedom of navigation was more important than the immediate safety of his ship. He would stand and fight. This decision was communicated to the approaching USS Tempest. The plan was no longer about escape. It was about making a stand, right there, in the heart of the Strait of Hormuz. The arrival of the USS Tempest at 3:19 a.m. was a pivotal moment. Commander Okonkwo skillfully positioned her undamaged destroyer between the crippled Hartley and the rapidly approaching Iranian swarm. The Tempest now formed a steel wall, a shield for her sister ship. Her advanced radar systems were fully functional, and her weapons were ready. The 2 American warships, one wounded and one whole, now stood together, presenting a unified front against the incoming threat. Commander Chin's decision to stay had been a gamble, but the arrival of the Tempest transformed it into a calculated defiance. They were no longer a single vulnerable target, they were a combined, lethal force. The crew of the USS Hartley, inspired by their commander's resolve and the presence of their reinforcements, prepared for the final confrontation. Damage control teams had successfully reduced the rate of flooding to 200 gallons per minute, and the fires were contained. The ship was stable, though still listing. On deck, gun crews manned the Phalanx CIWS, a Gatling gun designed to shred incoming missiles and small boats with a torrent of 20mm rounds. Helicopter crews readied their MH-60R Seahawk, armed with Hellfire missiles, to take to the air and engage the fast boats from above. Every remaining weapon system was brought to bear. The message was clear: they would not be moved. As the first wave of 11 Iranian boats closed the distance, the strait lit up with the flash of gunfire and missile launches. The Tempest and the Hartley engaged the swarm with a coordinated barrage of fire. The battle was chaotic, and fought at close quarters, a brutal ballet of high-explosive shells and evasive maneuvers. The U.S. destroyer's superior firepower and sensor technology gave them a decisive edge against the smaller, more numerous boats. The night was filled with the roar of cannons, the chatter of machine guns, and the bright streaks of missiles crossing the dark water. It was a desperate, violent clash that would determine control of the strait. In the aftermath, as the sun began to rise over the Persian Gulf, the raw courage of the sailors on both sides was undeniable. The crew of the USS Hartley, in the face of a surprise attack and critical damage, had not only saved their ship, but had stood their ground against overwhelming odds. Commander Chin's decisions, made under the immense pressure of combat, had turned a potential disaster into a stark demonstration of American naval resolve. The incident left the world on a knife's edge, but it also posed a fundamental question that echoes in the quiet corridors of power and in the minds of every military commander. Faced with a crippled ship, a wounded crew, and an escalating enemy assault, what would you have done?